Here at 93.5, 1590 WAKR, and time to bring him in. Film study professor, taking us to film schools he does each and every Friday at this time. It's our good friend Joe Fortunato on 93.5, 1590 WAKR. Hear that? He's going to go back to the mid-1960s. The third placement of the 007 movies, Goldfinger. Let's bring him in. Joe, take it from there, my friend. What do you got on Goldfinger this week?
Well, good morning, Ray. Yeah, we're going with James Bond today. We haven't done that yet, and I'm choosing what I think is sort of the quintessential James Bond movie, Goldfinger, from 1964. It was directed by Guy Hamilton, written by Richard Maybaum and Paul Deng, of course, based on the book by Ian Fleming. It actually won an Oscar for Best Sound Effects, ironically enough. The title song was performed by the great Shirley Bassey, who also did a couple other Bond films, Diamonds Are Forever and Moonraker. Guy Hamilton actually directed a number of James Bond films as well, including Live and Let Die, Diamonds Are Forever, and Man with the Golden Gun. So this is really where the James Bond franchise kind of hits its stride. It's the third Bond film. Guy Hamilton, the director, kind of wanted to infuse a little more humor in that, and I always enjoy that with my James Bond. So, there's a little bit more lightheartedness and such. This is also the movie where the character of Q, who, of course, does all the gadgets and stuff, really kind of clicked. He had been in the previous two movies, but Guy Hamilton wanted Desmond Llewellyn, who played Q, to inject some humor into the character, and sort of that began that friendly antagonism that James Bond and Q have about all the gadgets. And it was sort of the first appearance of Q's workshop where they tested gadgets, and that's always a fun moment in the films. This is the first movie that had a title song play in the opening credits, which is and it's a great song. The great Shirley Bassey, as I said, it was the first James Bond song to crack the Billboard Top 10, actually going up to number 8, as high as number 8 in February of 1965. So there's a lot of things that really kind of infused the James Bond mythos that kind of came its way in this film. One other thing, a little bit of trivia for that. This is the only Sean Connery James Bond movie where he orders a martini shaken, not stirred. In all the other ones that he's in, someone else says that line, not James Bond, but this one, it comes from Bond himself.
A lot of people wanted to know if the actual filming took place at Fort Knox, and obviously it did not. But talk about the film locations for the movie, because they were a couple of different places globally.
Yeah, the irony is that Sean Connery never traveled to the United States to film this movie at all. Every scene in which he appears to be in the U.S. was filmed at the Pinewood Studios in London. They recreated the Fort Knox repository at Pinewood Studios. Obviously, there's some exterior shots and things like that that are that were probably shot locally, in the United States. But the production itself with Sean Connery was never shot in the United States.
Joe Fortunato is with us at Film School. And Joe, it sounds like you agree with me here, but from doing some reading and getting ready for our show today, many people point to Goldfinger as the movie that put 007 on the map for good.
Yeah, and like I said, for so many things that we kind of look at as part of the James Bond mythos, this car, his Aston Martin DB5, was first appeared in this movie. And originally, Aston Martin was reluctant to give them the movies. It was supposed to be a Jaguar, but Jaguar declined. And then they went to Aston Martin. And due to the popularity of the movie, the Aston Martin DB5 gained the nickname the most famous car in the world. And they increased 50% sales after the release of the movie.
I know I had to have one of those little Corgi cars, Joe, when I was a kid in the mid-1960s because of the movie. I needed to have one for sure. So when we talk about filming and locations and then Sean Connery and such in Goldfinger, Talk about the villains, because everyone loves to talk about the villains in each one of the 007 movies.
Yeah, Goldfinger, we kind of sometimes talk about casting a little bit. The producers wanted Orson Welles to play the villain, Auric Goldfinger, but Welles was too expensive. Gert Frobe, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, the German name, who actually played Goldfinger, didn't speak much English, so most of his scenes he was speaking in German, and then they were overdubbed. There was a few lines that he did do in English, but a lot of it was in German. Joan Collins once claimed that she turned down the role of the Golden Girl, Jill Masterson, who famously or infamously was all painted in gold in the movie, but she turned it down because she was pregnant with her son at the time. Whether that's true or not, that's what Joan Collins claims. So it's kind of a fun piece of trivia. The co-star of the movie was Honor Blackman, who quit her role on the Avengers to appear in this movie. And she, of course, has a very unusual and risque name, which I won't say here on the air, but we'll call her Miss Galore for the purposes of this discussion. But the United Artists, people who don't know can certainly look it up, but the United Artists executives were a little nervous about the risque name of her character, and they didn't include that name in any of the trading cards or promotions and stuff that they did for the movie. In fact, Honor Blackman actually took a lot of delight in embarrassing her interviewers by repeatedly mentioning her character's name when she was promoting the film. But like I said, it was a little bit of a back and forth when they were promoting the film.
I love the character, the henchman, Odd Job, and this is an Olympic hero that got this role as Sakata, Harold Sakata.
Yeah, he was a wrestler, and this is really his first big movie role. Yeah, he's such a great Bond character and villain. He really works well in the movie. And again, talking about the sort of the tropes or whatever you want to call them of James Bond films, a lot of times you would have sort of a side villain who wasn't, like Jaws would come up later, as an example in some of the Roger Moore films. An Odd Job certainly was sort of that sidekick to Goldfinger himself.
Well, it was the first Bond movie to win an Oscar, as Joe mentioned, Best Sound Edition, and also in just 2 weeks it recouped the money as well, $120 million worldwide. Great look today as we went to film school on Goldfinger with film study professor Joe Fortunato each Friday at this time. WAKR, you can go back and look at the past film schools and this one just by going to WAKR.net. Joe, as always, my friend, thank you for the time. We'll reconnect on the show next week. Thanks again, Joe. Joe, you there?
Thanks, Ray. I can't really hear you. The music's playing.
I'm sorry. Thanks again, my friend. We'll reconnect next week. Joe Fortunato with us on Film School on WAKR looking at Goldfinger.